Okay, but everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to make something I've come up with I'm calling an Arnprior Rig. And what the problem that this solves is trying to access muskies in the weeds, particularly this time of year. Here we are, beginning of August. The weed growth is at close to its high point. We have a lot of fish holding in the weeds, and they're otherwise inaccessible. They're hard to fish with anything with treble hooks or exposed hooks to get in those weeds. And even when fishing on weed breaks or high level weeds, to get something sort of just to go through the tops of the weeds when they're real thick and not pull a bunch of them and give an unnatural presentation. Okay, so Arnprior Rig, what you're going to need is some leader material, some sleeves to crimp the leader material. You're going to need a small swivel, and I'll explain the swivel I use and why. And you'll see you're going to need a hook. In this case, I'm using a 12-aught Gamakatsu spring lock monster, and this is the size and type brand of hook that I recommend for making this rig. And I'll explain why I use those components as I make it. And the only tool you're going to need is a hand crimper. Okay, so first, prepping the materials. The only thing you're going to need to do to prep the materials is cut off your leader material in the length that you want it. In this case, 130 pound fluorocarbon, and I'm going to cut this one roughly a foot. I'm not real scientific when it comes. I just sort of know the length when I see it, and you don't need a lot of extra material when you're using crimps. So here we are. I have about a foot here, and this will end up being sort of a 11 inch or so rig. The first thing we're going to do is attach the swivel end. For that, I need to clamp on the swivel. So I'm going to be using these mini double barrel sleeves, and in case you haven't watched any of my other videos, I always make a point letting people know when using these mini double barrel sleeves, you get the exact size that matches with the leader material you're using. In this case, I'm using 0.051 inches or 1.3 millimeter mini double barrel sleeves with this 130 pound fluorocarbon from Sequar. So once I've threaded the tag end, the first tag end through one side of that mini double barrel sleeve, I'm going to grab the small swivel. In this case, I'm using a size 4 VMC barrel swivel. These are the lightest. I select these because they're small, they're light, they're lighter than the ball bearing swivels. And the reason I like them to be that light is because as I'm working this rig, just like any other leader, what I don't want is a real front end heavy leader with a real large swivel that pulls, that it really is giving the front end of my leader a lot more action than it's giving the lure. So I've threaded it through both ends there. I just have sort of, half a millimeter or so a tag end sticking out of one end of the barrel before I crimp, just enough to know that the leader's gone all the way through. I'm then going to crimp this with a hand crimper on the smallest setting, and I'm going to crimp it, make sure I crimp it in the center of the sleeve, and also I'm going to crimp the widest side down. So I'm crimping both barrels onto each other. I'll just do that now. 1, 2, okay. And you see I've done it correctly because you have flares at either end of the sleeve. They flare out, so at no end of the sleeve is it crimped down on the fluorocarbon material, giving it a potential to sort of fray or rub against it and weaken the material. So that's how that one end looks. Again, that's a size 4 barrel swivel. Sometimes people ask me why you swivels that are so small for muskie. Well, it's a size 4 barrel swivel, but it's a 180 pound test. So, I mean, it's not going to break. I've never had an issue. Although I've had plenty of issues using big ones and getting more action out of the front of my leader than I do about the business end of my line with lures. Okay, so now that I've attached that, we're going to go on and do the second mini double barrel sleeve, and we'll just thread that through one end. like this, and next thing I'm going to do is put it through the eye of the spring lock monster, 12/0, just like that. Coming back to feed it through the tag end through the other barrel on the mini double barrel sleeve. I just got it through enough, and I make a small enough hole. Should I go a bit smaller on this one just to maintain control and to keep the spring lock sort of mechanism there from fouling or getting caught up in there. So it's kind of a real smaller than normal hole. I'll crimp it the same way, focusing on the center, crimping the widest end. Okay, I got that down. There we go. So that's on. So we now have swivel at one end, hook at the other, and you know, that's how you make the leader. But in order to make this thing work, obviously you need the plastic bait. And this is these Kitech 7.8 inch and electric shad have been my go-to color and size on these. I'll just rig. This is how they come in the package. And I will. Lots of people are probably familiar with Kitech if you're a bass fisherman, but those 7.8 I found have been dynamite. Not a lot of people use them for muskie, so they're not used to seeing them. But I find what really makes the difference is when I rig this is that how you can pull them through the thickest weeds, and they just kind of weave in through there, bounce off all the weeds. They don't pick up any weeds and drag them along, so you get a real natural presentation of, you know, some kind of bait fish sort of either, you know, whether it's a sucker or a catfish sort of working its way through the vegetation. And also you'll see when I rig it is you can really drag this on the bottom. A lot of people talk about, you know, they want to drag some, bounce some rubber off the bottom, either, you know, a Medusa or a Bulldog. And, you know, I find that oftentimes we will pick up those bottom treble hooks, will pick up debris on the bottom, a stick, a piece of wood, a hunk of weeds, just the regular bottom debris in the places that muskies live. And, you know, maybe it doesn't matter entirely to the fish depending on what you pick up, but it definitely isn't a natural presentation. Okay, so putting this thing on, if you've ever been familiar with Kitechs and these spring log hooks, fishing other species, it's super easy. So there's a pin that just goes in the center of the bait here, and then just you apply a bit of pressure and screw it on. And once the screw takes, it's pretty easy. You get her on there, and the dark side is the back, the white side is the belly of the bait fish presentation. So like this, and you want to put the hook there, sort of take a quick measurement. Okay, that's where I want it to go through. Stick her in there. And now there's a channel in the bottom of these. You want to put the hook in the channel, and the hook comes, and there's a channel in the top. And you just want to manipulate it so the point of the hook comes out the top in the channel, and there you go, you're rigged. And now you can't feel the hook there at all. It's there, you can see it as soon as you apply a bit of pressure, but otherwise it swims like this, goes through all that deep vegetation, and gives a real natural swimming look as you're sort of you know, tweaking the end of your rod, moving it with a dive. It always swims on the dive, it swims on the rise, it's always swimming as long as it's moving. And if you are someone who likes dragging on the bottom for a bit of a catfish sucker imitation, you're not going to pick up anything on the hook because it's there. The only thing I've found on these is because you're not dealing with treble hooks, there's less hooks in the fish, which is good for the fish, but not always good for you. I've lost a few. I've hooked more muskies on this rig than I have in any of my other presentations, but I've also lost more because boat side, if you're not, you know, quick with the net, because you're only dealing with one hook in the fish as he fights you and starts to flail next to the boat. Yeah, so, you know, that the one hook I find is an issue, but in terms of the presentation and some are getting through weeds, you can't beat it. So there it is, an Arnprior Rig for muskie. I also use, besides 7.8, there's also a 6-inch version of the Swing Impact Fat, and the same color that I use, and to match that I use a 10-aught, not 12-aught, but this size I find works the best. Anyway, there you go. Hope it's useful and you catch fish with it. Thanks.